Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar presented by the Spring Stewardship Institute here in Flagstaff, Arizona on springs and springs-dependent species of the Desert Landscape Conservation Cooperative. My name is Larry Stevens. I'm the director of the Spring Stewardship Institute here, and we're joined today by Jerry Ledbetter, who's information manager for Spring Stewardship Institute. Also, Marguerite Hendry and Kelsey Johnson are assisting here in Flagstaff. Right now you are, you may not be muted, but you're welcome to either mute yourself or ask questions when you want. If there's any background noise, we may have to request that everyone mute themselves until they're ready to ask a question. But please feel free to ask questions. You can also ask questions on your screen, and we'll try to take note of those. This session is being recorded, and it will be posted on our website along with the PowerPoint presentation that we're giving here. And we hope everybody can hear and see the screen. If there are any emergencies that arise in this communication while we're operating today, you can give me a call at 928-380-7724, and we'll try to resolve your questions. You can also type in a question at any time on your control panel, and we'll try to answer them at the end of this slide. I guess it might be better for people to mute themselves now until you have a question. So if you do have a question, just unmute yourself and ask away. Does anyone object to showing the list of participants today? And if so, make that note on your screen. Otherwise, we'll show that list of participants. By way of general introduction, we have members of the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, several researchers, recognized experts on different topics of taxonomy, etc., state representatives, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Fish and Wildlife Service, other non-governmental agencies, tribes, and others on the phone today. And we certainly want to acknowledge the assistance of all the taxonomists that have been helping us with this project. Folks like Glenn Ranker are on with us today, and they've provided a tremendous amount of information and insight into this process. All right. Okay, so today what we want to look at is kind of review the project a little bit, talk a little bit about spring stewardship and its role in this project, and present to you the collaborative geospatial tools that Jerry and Benjamin Brandt have been developing for this process, talking about the online web-based Springs database that we're providing. We want to pay a fair amount of attention to data security today, to talk about how privileged information, sensitive information, is protected within this within our website, and how it remains the property of the spring steward to maintain, improve, and share as they see fit. We'll talk about the benefits, needs, and trade-offs associated with information collaboration, which is a topic that's kind of important because aquifers that support springs often run under multiple jurisdictional boundaries, and without having a common language and a framework to be able to talk about springs across the entire aquifer, we end up perhaps losing springs-dependent species in the landscape. I'll give you a brief update on the springs-dependent species process, which is underway and progressing through this next year of this 2-year project, and then we'll talk about the next steps, the next webinar, notification, workshops, and reporting. So, by way of introduction, the Spring Stewardship Institute is an initiative of the 501c3 nonprofit Museum of Northern Arizona here in Flagstaff, and our goals in this initiative are to improve the understanding of springs ecology and to educate the public and resource managers about the importance of springs and spring stewardship, as well as partner with other organizations, agencies. Let's see. So we've got a little bit of background noise. If you could mute your microphone, make sure you mute your microphone by hitting that little microphone symbol on the upper left side of your control panel there. That'll make our communications a little easier. All right, so the other element of SSI is to partner with other organizations, agencies, tribes, and researchers to improve the management of these critically endangered springs ecosystems. The Desert Landscape Conservation Cooperative is a rather vast area defined by the Bureau of Reclamation and the Fish and Wildlife Service as one of 17 different LCCs in the U.S. So the Desert LCC extends from southeastern California, including Death Valley, runs up a little bit farther north into southern Nevada, takes up the southern half of Arizona, the southern third of New Mexico, and stretches down to the Big Bend area in Texas, in southwestern Texas. And so the area here is about 217,000 square miles, and we provide an interactive map and a list of the counties in the DLCC landscape on our SSI website, springstewardship.org website, and you can look at that if you choose to. So there's a very large area, lots of different jurisdictions, and quite a few cities and towns that are of good size, including Las Vegas and Phoenix and Tucson, and many smaller communities, many national park lands, many national forest lands, lots of BLM land, quite a few Native American tribal lands, and so this is a very diverse landscape. The need here in our project to recognize the distribution of springs, the distribution of springs-dependent species, involves improving communication between all these different land management units and spring stewards. The Spring Stewardship Desert LCC project involves 4 tasks, the first of which seems like no small feat, mapping the distribution of DLCC springs in the United States portion of the DLCC to make springs information available to land managers through secure online resources. Much of the information that we're gathering is publicly available, so it's not really restricted information. However, any information provided by land managers is regarded as their intellectual property, and that's what really we seek to make sure is secure and that people are comfortable with storing and archiving in the website that we'll talk about. Task 2 is to determine the biological diversity and distribution of springs-dependent species. These are macro species, so we're looking at plants, macroinvertebrates, and vertebrates. Funding did not allow us to begin to investigate the diversity of microbes in the DLCC springs, but rest assured that there are likely tens of thousands of very interesting tiny creatures living in these springs that won't be reported in this process. As it is, we've got quite a list of species that we'll talk about here later in the program today. Task 3 is to conduct outreach through webinars, such as the one we're holding here, to conduct workshops, courses on springs stewardship and restoration, to maintain our website and provide communications among spring stewards. Task 4 is to develop a climate change model based on tasks 1 and 2, a process that we'll talk about in a subsequent webinar. So for task 1, we'll turn the discussion of collaborative online tools over to Jerry Ledbetter.
Hi, this is Jerry Ledbetter, and okay. Well, that sounded like, okay, can you hear me now? Good. So just a reminder, if you have a question, please, you are unmuted as far as we're concerned, and please ask any questions you want. If you don't, go ahead and keep yourself muted the rest of the time if you would, please. So we're working on two types of online tools to help land managers access information that we're generating here, and I'm going to show you the geocollaborative tools that we've been working on, and I'm going to sorry about this. Okay, so this is a map of the desert LCC, and this is available online through our website and through ArcGIS Online. You can see that the boundary extends down into Mexico, and we aren't looking at Mexico as part of this grant. We weren't allowed to continue into Mexico. So the U.S. portion of the DLCC is what we're looking at. And if you zoom in, you can see the maps that the springs that we've already mapped. The light green are springs that have been verified, and we have some level of information. The dark green are surveyed springs, and the blue are unverified. They're reported, but not necessarily. We haven't actually field verified them, and that is a process that we're going through with collaborators in various parts of the DLCC. But you can see certain land areas have a lot of really high quality information. This is the Spring Mountains in Nevada, actually. So you can go online and you can pan around and look at all the springs that have been mapped. You can apply different base maps. The only springs that are showing up on here are publicly available information already. So if it's not known to the public, if it's not in any kind of published resource, then it won't appear here, even though we do have it in our geodatabase. So if you click on a spring, a pop-up shows what information we have. Okay, so that's one map that we made, and this covers the entire DLCC. We also have additional maps that we've created just for individual land units. This is one that we made for the Sky Island Alliance. Before this, each of us was working on individual geodatabases of springs, and then we'd have to try to bring them together and work out the duplicates, and that was really inefficient. So this map actually reads from our server, and the Sky Island Alliance can go in and edit this directly from at the same time that we're editing it here. And so it's a much more geocollaborative process. So again, I can click on a spring, I can open up more information associated with that spring. So here's a report about that particular one. I can again apply different base maps, and they can go into a spring and actually edit it, make any edits to the information. They can also add new springs. So this is a really great geocollaborative tool that we have for them. Another land unit that we've been working with is the Spring Mountains of Nevada. I think Jim is with us here. So this is a mapping application that's available. You can see it's available on our website. Same thing, you can zoom in, and we created this. It's acting a little weird. That's the risk when you have something that's live. But this was the perimeter of the Carpenter Fire that was going on last summer, and so we could show, we were updating this every couple of days, and people who were could access this map and see what springs were affected by the Wallow Fire. Sorry, the Carpenter Fire. So that's the first type of tool that we have, and we've been working with other land units like Grand Canyon National Park so that we can be working off of the same data. Are there any questions so far? Just sing out. Okay, so the second, and actually the harder project that we've been working on is an online database that Benjamin Brandt has been helping with, and we've been working in collaboration with the Sky Island Alliance. It's based off of a database that Larry Stevens, Abe Springer, and I have been working on for almost 10 years now. And so we are migrating that. Again, we were having the problem of it wasn't collaborative because it was in Access, Microsoft Access, and the database was here at our office. And so for Sky Island Alliance to enter data, they had to come up here, or they had to send us the field sheets and we entered it. So it wasn't very efficient. So we have now launched this online database for beta testing. You can go into it and search for springs. So I'm searching for General Spring here, and General Springs on Coconino National Forest comes up. You can open up the site information and look at the description of it, the most recent images and sketch map also appear on this. So if you have multiple surveys, what you'll be looking at is the most recent. Then there's a list of all the surveys associated with that site. Georeferencing information is in here, geomorphology, and that includes lithology, the spring type. This particular one is an exposure spring. And these are all drop-down boxes so that it confines the responses to make sure that data are added consistently. And the EOD is it's the extent of data. It's the number of categories of information that we've collected data. And the history shows what changes, when changes were made and who made them. And that's just for quality control. So I opened a survey. If you click on the survey date, you can open the survey, and this is all the data that were collected on that date. You can see there's flow, there's water quality. We have a list of all invertebrates that were noted at the site or collected. If I click on the invertebrate name, then it opens a species, the taxonomic form that has all the information about the species plus all the sites where that species has been reported. So you can see as this database becomes populated, it's just an incredibly valuable resource of information. There's a similar system for vertebrate species and for plants. We'll look at that later. The images, again, you can upload one or multiple images. There's not too much of a limitation as to how many images you can upload, and also sketch maps. And this is our assessment information, the SEEP. So that's just an overview of the online database. It's, like I said, it's available for beta testing now. And but as of this weekend, we're trying to go live with all the current data that we have, and we're trying to make the leap to from the Access database at our office to the online database. So I encourage you to check it out. This week, the next few days, any changes that you made would be lost, but then as of this weekend, like I said, any changes that you make would stay. So then you need to be more careful. Any questions about that so far? So let's look at the vegetation section of this. And the reason I'm using on these movies is just so that you don't have to endure any kind of glitches that we run into. But in making these movies, we didn't have too many glitches, really. So when you click on the microhabitat information, this is when we complete a survey, we identify microhabitats associated with the site. And these are just descriptions, the substrate, a description of the geomorphology of it, percent litter cover, percent wood cover. So now we go into the vegetation, and that takes the lion's share of any kind of a survey that we complete, and it also takes the lion's share of data entry. So we've tried really hard to make the data entry process simple, but also constrained so that you can so that the data are entered consistently, so that a species is entered the same way all the time. So you can sort by any of these columns of information, by species name, by percent cover, by native status. And if I click on the species name, it opens up the taxonomic form where we have a list of every other place that species has been reported. And this is throughout the database. So this includes Canada, it includes the Spring Mountains, and all over the DLCC, as well as the Southern Rockies LCC, because we've worked up there too. So I can go to any of those sites and open up the site information for that list of sites where that species has occurred. Again, this is as this database becomes populated, you can see the value of this information. How are we doing? Okay, please ask questions if you have any. Okay, so this is another way to search for springs. I can go into, I'm going to click, I only want to look at springs with survey data. I'm going to select the United States, Arizona, just Coconino County, and I did ask Heather Green and Ariel Leonard if we could look at springs on their landscapes, and they said it was fine. So we're going to look at Coconino National Forest. I could select a particular quad or a particular huck. So there are a lot of criteria that you can enter looking for springs. So I hit search, and you can see that there are 262 springs that have survey data. So we'll open Barbershop Springs here, and you can open any of these locations that have survey data. You can also search. You can show search results on a map, and you can search by latitude and longitude. But we'll do a quick search here for only springs with survey data, and all surveys are associated with a project. So we're going to look at Kaibab Springs project that we've been working on with Ariel Leonard for a couple of years, 4 years now. There are 170 springs that have survey data, and so you can display those coordinates in a map. And this shows the type of spring. These are the different symbols show what type of spring is there. So you can go to, you can look for hanging gardens and open up information, but we'll just go to this one and see an image and the information that we have about Castle Spring. So we have multiple projects in here. Like I mentioned, Spring Mountains, we have their data imported. So I can go into a particular project, so I'll just type in Spring Mountains. And it lists all of the springs that we have survey data for. So you can sort by site name, by land unit, by date, by extent of data. So the higher number there is the higher level of information. So an 11 is about the highest. That means 11 categories of information are included in the survey. So I'll go into Big Timber Spring and take a look at the surveys, and you can open a survey from here. The vegetation, you can also look directly from at a particular taxon. So we have a taxonomic editor. So if I enter a scientific name, I can also enter common name for a species. So we'll just select this particular one and take a look at it. We have all this information is imported from the USDA plants database. And again, there's a list of all the sites that where that particular species has been reported. We have the USDA codes and the growth habit, native status, wetland status from the USDA in here as well. We also, this is where we store the springs-dependent species information that Larry will talk about later. And the distributional information, you can enter an elevation range, you can enter localities associated with that site if we don't have specific springs data, and you can also upload a distribution map in here. I'm going to make a plug then for collaboration here. If collaborators get in here and upload information or upload range maps, there's huge value in that. There's also huge value in people having access to this. I'm just opening Bear Lake on North Kaibab Ranger District, and there are 3, I think. So if you go into the description, you have the general description of the site, and you have the most recent images, the most recent picture, and the most recent sketch map. But you can see there are 3 different surveys in here that we have imported from 3 different projects. One was back in 2000 with Grand Canyon Wildlands Council, and the most recent one was Grand Canyon Trust. So you have a lot of information over time then that can be used for monitoring. And there you see the most recent images. They took water chemistry. So if we go into the polygons and we look at the vegetation data, they have a really good plant list, and Glenn Rink participated in that survey as well. So there's huge value then in opening this up for collaborators. This is NGOs, independent researchers, other land management agencies that work that are neighbors. However, we have set a way to keep this information secure. It's resides on our secure website at the Museum of Northern Arizona. And this is the way I go in to set permissions. So I'm going to go into Joe User, and the sensitivity level can be adjusted. We can also set an end date when their permissions expire. So if it's just a student that wants to have access to the information for a period of time. But let's say this guy is interested in the CNF Volunteers Project, where volunteers have been going to sites around the peaks and collecting survey data. Little LaRue Springs has gotten a lot of interest here. So now I'm logged in as Joe User. I can go into the CNF Volunteers Project, and I can enter data for Little LaRue Spring. Let's say I was just out there this morning and I'm a birder. I could add a new survey, and I can report the birds that I noted at the site. So there is there's a lot of interest in opening up this particular project, the CNF Volunteers Project, so that volunteers can enter data. So I've created a survey. I'm going to go into vertebrates, and I'm just going to add new vertebrate records. Evening grosbeak. So you don't have to have full survey data. You don't have to have that 11 extent of data. You can just have one report of one really interesting bird, and you're done. But you've saved that as a survey, and there's a record of it that's available online. So do you have, what questions do you have then? I'm going to make Larry the presenter again.
Very good. Any questions then within the group about these issues of informational security are, you know, they're pretty hot topic issues. So any questions you have now, please ask, or if you'd like to email us and with those questions, we can also provide this to the group even an hour later.
This is just a quick description of the table structure showing all the information that's included in the database, and the structure is designed so that you can ask questions of the characteristics, the relationships between these characteristics at Springs. So our main topic of conversation today is with land managers about how you guys feel about the way this is structured, and how you would like to see this project proceed as far as applying user levels.
Right, and what we're presenting here is an integrated way to look at Springs data that any land steward, any spring steward can use and feel confident in the security of, and if they choose, be able to talk to their neighbors about Springs in an integrated fashion. We've reviewed Springs protocol, Springs inventory and assessment protocols, probably a dozen different versions of data inventory tools that are available. Those by Don Seda, those by the DOD, those by individual counties in some cases, the U.S. Forest Service, the Park Service, BLM. Every agency seems to want its own version of a database. It's great that attention to Springs is out there and developing. However, with each agency having a different way of talking about Springs and talking about Springs data, that may actually exacerbate the problem of the lack of communication between neighbors. So here, the effort is to provide a unified database that addresses all the issues that we've come up with through that review of all these different techniques. Any form of data that can be collected at a Spring, we think we have capacity to store here, and in a secure way, so the land manager has jurisdiction over that intellectual property information, for that information that's not publicly available, and gives them the ability to talk with their neighbors. Identification of rare springs type in a landscape and the aquifers that support those rare springs types might be a conservation priority for many folks. If you have a rare hanging garden in a landscape that doesn't have many of those, you know, very often we have unique species or rare species associated with that kind of habitat that may not show up anywhere else in the landscape. So maybe there are two adjacent land managers, each of which have one hanging garden on their lands, and those become kind of high priority conservation targets then. So what we're trying to do here is to present tools that allow everybody to talk in the same language about springs and the springs species that they may have on their lands, and in a protected way, so that the information is carefully protected as well. All right.
So there have been a couple of questions, one from Rebecca asking why the Colorado Plateau is not included in the DLCC, and we don't quite understand ourselves how these boundaries were laid out. Most of the Colorado Plateau is included, the upper Colorado Plateau is in the Southern Rockies LCC, but there's a little bit of it that extends into Idaho and a little bit into Wyoming, and not all of the Colorado Plateau is even in both of these landscapes, and we honestly don't quite understand that. Rebecca also asked about uploading data, and we have uploaded a lot of data into the system while it was Microsoft Access, and And so especially water quality data, it's a lot more efficient if you get a water chemistry report. We can just upload it, and that's pretty simple. Uploading into this system, it's just a different skill set for us. But Benjamin, are you online, and can you answer that question?
Yeah, I'm online. So the question was whether we could upload data into the web system?
Yeah, will it accept XLS or CHV files?
I mean, we could certainly set that up. There hasn't been any tools yet put forth to give the ability to do that, but it certainly would be a possibility. It would be probably the most straightforward approach would be to allow the ability to upload CSV files containing data, and that could certainly be set up in the future. But as of right now, it's hasn't been developed yet.
One thing I think we could do. Oh, sorry. Is somebody asking?
Oh, this is Rebecca. Actually, hi. I was wondering, you know, with some of us that maybe do have a vast amount of previous data that we would potentially want to share with this this group, it seems like that's going to be a lot of work for someone to sit down and manually input one piece at a time. Is that what's been going on so far?
No, we have actually imported rather a lot of information from different survey protocols. We've imported data from the Forest Service GDE database, which Jim was asking about, and I'll get to that in a minute some more. We have imported data using Don Sata's protocols, and that's been working fine, but that's been done in-house. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly something that we've talked about with one of the park networks is just taking their data and we would import it rather than, we certainly don't expect anybody to sit down and manually enter data that are already electronic. So absolutely, we import a ton of information using a lot of different protocols, and we'd love to talk to you about that. That's actually part of this project, is to try to compile all these various data sets into one place and have it accessible. We just got a data set from some researchers in Grand Canyon that we're working on importing, and we got data from Steve Monroe from the Parks Network to import. Yeah, we can also import images and sketch maps, and we have a lot of capacity to do that. But as far as an interface within this online system, we haven't gotten to that point yet, and we haven't really even talked about that yet. What I envision, at least at first, is for us to import it in-house. And Jim Hurya asked about the GDE database, and that is the direction the Forest Service is going. I designed both of these data structures, though. I designed the GDE database that the Forest Service is using, and I designed ours, and I made them as compatible as humanly possible, given constraints of differing protocols. But Jim, we can and we have imported Forest Service data into our system, and we've also taken data from our database and imported it into a GDE database. So they're not the same, and the Forest Service is deeply committed to their protocols and their methodology. But importing back and forth it's not, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it is possible. It doesn't take that long, and we're getting better at it. Ariel asked, when our database, the SSI database, was migrated to the GDE database, were the protocols or procedures, did I document those procedures? Is that what you're asking? That's what I think, Ariel.
No, I was just wondering if there was. Oh, I was going to clarify. So that was a one-time deal, but can we refresh that GDE as the other Forest Service data? So we'll build and maintain it in the Spring Stewardship database, but then is there a mechanism or a way in the future to kind of bring that over? Whether or not it's, you know, scripted so that it's easier, or, I mean, I imagine it's funding limited, that we're going to need to fund to do that again. Is that, you could just speak to that a little bit?
I don't think, I put a lot of thought into that as I was taking all of the SSI data and importing it into a GDE database, and I did keep track of the procedures that I used in order to make that happen, and it was, you know, it was just a set of steps that I documented, and we should be able to do that again. When we add new sites, when we add new surveys, we should be able to move that across. And it wouldn't be, I wouldn't think it would take that much time, and we've made the commitment to try to do that already. Because we do feel that it's important to have this information all in one place, all in this system, but we also recognize that the Forest Service has taken this other route, and there's and we want to be able to move information back and forth. Does that answer the question?
It's also the case that the National Park Service, the BLM, and some other organizations have their own databases, and so being able to integrate these so that we're begin to be able to talk in a common language about these virtually irreplaceable resources in the landscape is the goal here.
But we are trying to encourage land management agencies to use this system so that we don't have multiple databases with differing information. If they haven't already made the major commitment that the Forest Service has made, we're trying to get them to consider using this methodology and this database.
In one of the projects we're working on, 3 different agencies have their own databases, and we're trying to integrate all that data into one coherent system of understanding of springs and springs ecology.
And Rebecca, do you have another question?
I had one for. I do. Just going back to the Colorado Plateau question and why this DLC doesn't include all of the Colorado Plateau. If we have, like my research area is some of it's inside the DLCC and others are outside of it and not covered by the Rocky Mountain, what do you suggest? Maybe this isn't the right place for it, but would you take that data? Would you be interested in that data even if it's outside of your boundaries?
Rebecca, this is Larry. Yes, in setting up the DLCC project, of course, we imported all the springs that are known from all the states that occupy the DLCC. So it's California, all of Nevada, all of Arizona, New Mexico. I think all of Utah is in there as well. And in anticipation of possible funding for Southern Rockies, we've also pulled in all the Four Corners states, Wyoming, perhaps Idaho as well, and so we've got pretty extensive coverage for the overall western Intermountain West, excluding the Pacific Northwest at this point, but that's also in our sites. So we actually have information already compiled on the springs of that whole portion of the U.S. I think there are about 75,000 springs in the database so far, and we hope that that's more than 1 in 5, but we never know really until we get into a specific landscape and can really see what the accuracy is of the mapping that's been done. So we're very much interested in springs throughout the world. The scope of SSI is global, including not only terrestrial springs but subaqueous springs. So springs on the floor of the ocean are also of interest to us in this overall project process. And any data that we can acquire on springs, especially kind of large landscape surveys, are quite of interest to us. We're going to do a presentation at the joint meeting of the Aquatic Sciences in Portland, Oregon, on the 20th of May, and in which we present a discussion of global distribution of springs. I guess there might be as many as 1 million springs in the U.S., perhaps and perhaps more, and perhaps 10 million springs on Earth throughout the world. They're rather unevenly distributed, but the more insight we get into how springs are located, what the distribution of them is within kind of complex landscapes, especially, and what species they support. That's all within the scope of our project. So, any information we can coax out of you would be most welcome. We would be trying to provide a secure place to store that information, and in a way that if you choose to share it with others, which seems to us like a very valuable way to go about this process, then that'll be available too. But that would be a subject to your discretion.
Well, are there any questions associated with the data security? Because as I said, we've put a tremendous amount of time into making this secure, but we also have a lot of situations over the past few years where students approach us and they're trying to research. We're working with a student now who's looking at the relationship between geomorphic diversity and plant diversity, and that's of huge value, and it's contributing a great deal to furthering knowledge about springs. But we need to come up with a mechanism to release information for projects like that without putting the information at risk. And so that was something that we wanted to open up to, especially to land managers, but also to researchers who are working on projects like this. Researchers who might, like Glenn Rink, who travels around this country a lot, and he comes across plants, and it would be really great if he could just enter plants into this database and have access to that information. It's this collaborative process is pretty huge, and I think the next slide actually is just our initial ideas about the benefits and risks of collaboration of this type.
So the benefits to us seem to, like, having more eyes on the ground allows agencies that don't have enough funding to be able to really monitor and even inventory their springs, gives those agencies the ability to do so. Providing high quality data to and from independent researchers seems like a very valuable aspect of this as well. The example of Glenn Rink searching out carex around the Southwest and being able to provide that data is just of tremendous value to everyone. One of the benefits is it might enable independent researchers to investigate biophysical relationships across broad landscapes, a process that's very difficult right now. Our strategy right now is a researcher comes to us and says, I want to look at the relationship between pH and whatever, marsh plant cover across elevation, and so therefore within the landscape that they're interested, we can point that individual to half a dozen different resource stewards that they should talk to acquire permission to access the information. Their information grab might have nothing to do with the locations of springs other than trying to figure out the elevations, and there would be no real release of any sensitive information in that research question. It's just having access to those data. Right now is a bit challenging because we have to go through each of these this process of having that individual contact each of the agencies. As more of those kinds of questions come up, that's more workload on the spring steward for releasing information. But that's the present strategy we've got here. Another benefit might be that the process will enable land managers, NGOs, and researchers to assess climate change risks across elevation, across large landscapes. Those kinds of analyses really require a lot of data, and this is a mechanism that could provide those data, provided the participants are willing to share that information. We can the present structure of this should allow the engagement of the public, NGOs, and citizen science groups as volunteers to agencies. That's a huge, I think, cost saving there, and also being able, as I said before, to share data with neighboring land units, because the aquifers cross administrative boundaries in many cases. And overall, this brings increased attention to springs as important and irreplaceable ecosystems, a conservation statement that we really hope is beginning to resound, that we hope is being able to be heard more clearly by the land managers. There's a tremendous bang for the buck for being able to conserve springs. A survey of 50 to 100 springs within a large landscape generally nets about 1/4 of the overall plant species in that landscape. And so, you know, to conserve 1/4 of your plant species, conserve 50 to 100 springs, and you've got a tremendous conservation benefit there. The risks here to collaborators have to do with concerns about sharing knowledge, sensitive species, and cultural sites, and we completely respect and understand the sensitivity of some of those kinds of data, and do not want to interfere with protection of those kinds of data. Is this too much information? Some land managers we've worked with may not want to know as much as they might find out about their springs from this process. So, but really the question there is, how much do land managers need to know to do an adequate job of protecting these resources? There's certainly the risk of culpability to land managers. Without this information, species can be lost, habitat can be degraded, and without monitoring, there may not be any clue as to that process going on. Is there vulnerability to Freedom of Information Act for exploitative use? Does a bioprospecting company have the right to come in and acquire these data? Those decisions are the decisions of the land managing agency. They're not ours. So we would always defer to the land managers for any kind of requests that come in of that nature. The risks to water right claims, well, land managers may or may not have all the rights they want for the springs that are on their land. So that might help clarify what water rights exist and how to resolve those claims. Are there risks related to NEPA compliance? Again, knowing more might make NEPA process more complicated for some land managers. There are certainly boundary disputes when it comes to disputes over somebody pumping on one side of a boundary and the springs go dry on the other. Having the information might make those legal contests more well-defined, perhaps, and that could be viewed as a risk. And the last issue that we had as a potential risk might be the security of information stored at the museum here. The museum for the last 85 years has stored sensitive cultural, tribal, and Federal Resource Agency information quite successfully without any real challenge. And this is kind of a continuation of that storage of sensitive information here. So so we don't see that really as being too much of a risk, but somebody might. All right.
So a couple of people have suggested some kind of a procedure, you know, a standardized form. Ariel suggested a way for ecologists to provide information associated with the project. And
We can't hear you.
okay, I'm trying again. We've discussed, a couple people have asked, Ariel Leonard and Marianne McGraw asked about setting up some kind of a procedure, having some kind of a form that the land manager fills out, a way that allows the public and ecologists to provide information, even if they're not associated with a project. And Mary Ann mentioned, an IGA with land managers and data holders on a protocol for sharing data. And I think that that would be the simplest way to go about this. For example, we just have a form. Ariel and Heather and Jim would fill it out, outlining what protocols they would accept when there's a request for information. And also, we are going to set up the database so that someone who's an administrator on a land unit can allow permissions to access data. So another user could sign up and they could apply permissions to that user. So it wouldn't have to be done through us necessarily. It could be done through the land manager as well. So I think that is a pretty workable way to manage this.
So what we might do is work with those folks to develop a draft and then pass that around to anybody who's interested in commenting on it. And of course, not accepting that form would mean that your data would still be protected under the existing structure, but that form might allow much greater ease of access to valid requests especially for research to Springs data. All right, we need to move on here to wrap this up. And
there was one other question. A part of Ariel's question was if they could have some kind of quality control review prior to the data being accepted into the system. And we have talked about that as well. One of the mechanisms we have for quality control is whenever anybody adds information or edits information, there's a date stamp and their name is associated with it. And so if there are any kind of problems or issues, or if we're getting unreasonable data, we have the ability to review that and delete it if we need to, or discuss it. But some kind of quality control review prior to data being entered, we don't have a plan for that. But that's a good suggestion, and maybe after this we can talk to Benjamin and see what sort of capacity we might have for that.
Yes, right now our quality control is project dependent. So whatever the level of quality control of the agency or the individuals requesting the project, that's what we follow. Oftentimes that's standard protocols of evaluating 10% of the data or whatever. So more. All right. Am I being heard now?
Yes.
That's good. The second task of this, that was the first task. The second task that we want to report on today is just a kind of a quick overview of Task 2, determine the biological diversity and distribution of springs-dependent species in the DLCC. Springs-dependent species are those organisms that, for which at least one life stage is dependent on springs or springs habitat and the outflow of the springs. The question there is, will this species exist without the springs habitat? And if the answer is no, then we call it a springs-dependent species. That varies a lot by the timing of the actual kind of way that springs-dependent species exists within the context of the springs. Right now we're developing species lists. We've got more than 2,100 plant species, 1,100 invertebrate species, 54 vertebrates on a list under consideration for springs as being springs-dependent species. That list will be cut down, but there may well be more than 1,000 springs-dependent species within the DLCC on that list. We're vetting those lists with experts like Glenn Rink and others. So far we've inquired of experts at 10 institutions and 15 taxonomists plant, vertebrate, and invertebrate taxonomists. We are attempting to pull together information on each of the springs species that we're looking at, and then databasing that as we can. This is an ongoing process. The end result here will be an annotated list of those species with information about them, so that any land manager can have access to those species. Most of that information is publicly available, published reports. Arizona Game and Fish Department, for example, has more than 200 species reports out on the web. So therefore, the sensitivity of that information is not great. What might be sensitive are additional localities that individual land managers might have for some of those species. Again, that would be sensitive information that wouldn't be shared with the world in general. All right. In terms of the outreach component, that's what we're trying to do with this presentation, and we do have individualized consultation going on here, and assisting with training for ecological monitoring and assessment and inventory. We're having a workshop on the 6th and 7th of May here in Flagstaff on springs inventory and assessment. Another is planned for October 15th and 16th in Las Vegas, so mark your calendars. We're conducting quarterly webinars and holding courses with different educational institutions, a Prescott College course in May, some work with the Eastern Arizona College as well. And please feel free to look at our website for updates on what's going on there. Jim has a question. We think
Jim Herja has been joining us here, and I was just wondering if you had a question you wanted to ask.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, you can hear me. Okay. Well, concerning, it's almost a question as much as, when we're dealing with people who actually want to go out and do research on springs, especially going on there, the idea, though, they need to, one thing we've had problem in the past is people going out there and we don't even know what's going on. They come and all of a sudden we see an article on the paper, and then publication there, we had no clue they were out there. And ideally, is on all the agency lands, they're basically, where we actually ask them to do some sort of special use permit there if they're not under contract or an agreement like we had with you, was to so they can do the work, but we also have access or control what they're doing, so they're not conducting any resource damage that we're not aware of. So it's a key when we're actually working with people who actually who are going out there, that we know, okay, if they're collecting data, or for instance, this one gentleman collects characters there, we need to know that, okay, this is there, we need to have that, basically review that data, make sure that we're aware of the information also. And, like I said, sharing, I think sharing the data that you, like you're talking about in the forum there, again, it's a lot of stuff is agency property, but it's also, we're making willing, it means being open, it is also public knowledge too, so it's always, it's good to keep the agencies in the loop when we're actually, we can actually do these. I think, like I said, a form or something like that we can actually generate would actually, as long as with the agency's approval, that we could actually be able to move this data through.
Really good comment and question there. Many agencies have that same issue. National Park Service is very rigorous about their permitting for research and whatnot, and so part of the draft form we might put around there, send around there, is that the researcher might have to actually obtain a research permit for that land unit, and that would be part of the overall agreement. We'll draft that with your help and send it around to folks to make sure that concern is addressed.
However, this is mostly regarding their access to data that have already been collected. That was the bulk of our question to you. And on this form, it would be good to reiterate that if they're talking about going out and collecting data, they need to have the permission of the land management agency. And this is also true for private land and tribal lands. We're not encouraging people in the public to go out and do research in the forest, but if they're there anyway, Just imagine somebody who goes into the forest a lot, who spends a lot of time on forest land, and they happen to notice that there's a species, an invasive species that's taking over a site, or there's a buffalo wallow, or there's a fence down, or any number of things. They take or ATVs, are roaring around on it. They take a photograph, they upload it, and they note that kind of impact. The value of that, I think, is really huge. Okay.
Okay, so to wrap up our webinar today, the next steps are that we're continuing to evaluate feedback. We really appreciate your time today, and any comments you have on this process we'd love to hear about. We'd like to continue expanding the collaborative network that we've got, so if you can recommend others who might be informed about the project and participate in future webinars. We're continuing to compile Springs and SDS data and to develop these online web mapping applications. And we'll make sure that these are completed and distributed and resolving the Springs dependent species list to get that out to you as well. The next quarterly webinar is scheduled for the 30th of July at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and we look forward to hearing from you there, or your participation in that webinar. So thank you so much for your time today, and please let us know your comments on this process. So from Flagstaff, Arizona, Spring Stewardship Institute, this has been Larry Stevens, Jerry Ledbetter, and our staff, and we look forward to communicating with you more. Thanks very much.